Welcome to Building Better Worlds, where we celebrate voices from around the world that are helping to forge a shared and abundant Web3 future. I'm your host, Julian Guderley, creator of the GreenPlanet BluePlanet podcast. And for this episode today, I'm here with Reggie Luedtke. Welcome, Reggie.
Thanks.
Yeah, Reggie is an Edmund Hillary Global Impact Fellow in New Zealand, and he's working with Maori leaders in the movement to grant legal personhood to the more than human world, and he's the founder of Earth Equity. And so, Reggie, I already said where you are in the world, but maybe you can share a little bit in your own words how you ended up in New Zealand and what you're working on with Earth Equity.
Yeah, happy to. My background was more on, I guess, like the tech startup side of things. I started a healthcare IT consulting company, co-founded that. Basically grew that from, we started with just me and my friend co-founder, and then it ended up growing to like 450 employees before it was eventually acquired. And I think part of the reason that we were successful with that is this like principle of value in equals value out. So with incoming employees and the consultants as well, it was really important to me and to basically make sure that the value they received, like in stock or stock options, was related to the value that they were bringing and not how good of a negotiator they were. So that was kind of like the idea I brought to New Zealand. I went to a Charles Eisenstein retreat there. And then, at the retreat, I learned about the Wanganui River being granted legal personhood. So the river was going to own the river. And that was like mind-blowing for me, because I think part of the reason corporations have so much power is they have legal personhood. And then basically this idea of value in equals value out got mingled, I think, in my brain with legal personhood. And it was during a conversation kind of like at just sort of like a lunch at this, what was the predecessor to the Edmund Hillary conference or fellowship. Somebody who was starting a company said, "Oh, I heard you really like to think about cap tables. Can you help me brainstorm my cap table?" And his company was measuring the water quality of rivers. And basically I just kind of like in a download, I was like, well, your company wouldn't exist if the river didn't exist. And if the river can own itself, then conceivably it could own stock too. If we were going to honor this value and equals value out, nature can't negotiate for value, but it's certainly bringing a ton of value. What if you gave nature a shareholding, and then as an early insignificant shareholder, you put nature on your board? And he was like, "Oh man, that sounds great. I want to do that." And then I shared that at the conference. Maybe there were 100, 150 people there just for a couple minutes, kind of to me and said they wanted to give equity to a river. I had never really done anything environmental before. And that's basically been my last 4 years, getting connected to Maori leaders and figuring out how to do this.
Yeah, it's a new idea for many people. I think there's, New Zealand is a good example. Ecuador is another example, where, Earth has equity and stake in legal rights. Maybe dive a level deeper for those people for whom this is a new concept still, is like why is this a great idea, right? And then what becomes possible when we give Earth equity?
Yeah, totally. And I just want to acknowledge that this is, I think it's illustrated in my story. I was not thinking about this before I came to New Zealand. So this is really Maori innovation. It comes from their worldview and is really more, at least from the Maori worldview, from what I've heard and understood, it's more about neutralizing the Western legal system and the Western financial system. And just the fact that we have to call it personhood instead of riverhood, I think just kind of illustrates but it's the legal system that is in place now. So I think part of the reason why this is you asked like why is this important, or like how does it work? Yeah, so in the case of the Wanganui River, each of the sort of I guess entities, what used to be a national park, Tiotaweta, Wanganui River, and soon Taranaki Maunga, or Mount Taranaki, each have a different process. But for the Wanganui River, they made the river an orphan in the court system. Legally, they made it an orphan, and then there are legal guardians assigned to speak for the river's best interests. So basically, in the same way that like an orphan that's say 1 year old, 1 years old, like they can't speak for themselves, but they still have rights, and they still have, interests that should be sort of respected, I guess. And so if a legal guardian came in and said, I think it's best for the orphan, the orphan inherited all this money, he wants to give it to me, the judge would say, you're not being a good legal guardian. There are legal obligations that you have if you're the guardian for this orphan. And basically there's a similar kind of setup for the river, that there are guardians. In the beginning, it was mostly government appointed guardians. And I think it was 3 iwi or tribe guardians. And then over time, that's migrated more to towards the iwi or tribe side and away from the government side. And they're obligated to speak in the best interest, legally obligated to speak in the best interest of the river.
And so the second part of the question was, what becomes possible then when we have people that are legally obligated, to speak for the best interests of nature, which, it makes me smile just to even talk about it. It's like, wow, we're possibly able to, work around this, very complex and restrictive legal system that humans have created. So what, and maybe you can find a pragmatic example of something you've witnessed in the last 4 years of what becomes possible.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's become possible from what I've heard from the Taranaki Maunga project is that organizations which have never been able in the past to work well together, when they come together to support the well-being of the mountain, there's a kind of collaboration that is possible there that wasn't before, or at least that's the experience that I've heard relayed. So it's this idea that it's more so that we belong to the mountain than the mountain belongs to us. And yeah, these organizations, they're able to come together as part of, with that settlement process, that's a treaty settlement process. I think there were 8 iwi that had to come together and basically have at least to some degree, a shared worldview and a shared idea of where they wanted to be heading. And then once you have a sense of kind of maybe, what the mountain wants, then, if you're a business and you're talking with someone who's representing the mountain, I think it becomes pretty hard to say, well, we as a business, we really need this. And yeah, I understand the mountain needs that, but, can't you see our side too? And so there are types of collaborations that have been happening that weren't happening before. And I think that there's a lot of really exciting things that we can do sort of coming up. I think we're just at the very tip of this. It's kind of like, say back in like the 1800s, if we were saying, imagine if slaves had rights, like what's possible? There's a different world that happens. Or if children had rights or women could vote, like it seems almost obscene to imagine a world before that. And I think I think at some point we will have riverhood and mountainhood and foresthood, and the world will likely be quite a different place. And so but basically right now we're just trying to further the movement kind of in that direction. And I think one of the key things is it feels like values aligned businesses can be part of making that movement.
Mm-hmm. I like what you're saying. It's like we're at the tip of acting from whole systems awareness. And when we make legal rights of nature a bridge or a stepping stone into this kind of awareness,
Yeah,
then yeah, companies can lead like that, and we can build tech even that is, maybe surrendered to the laws of nature rather than trying to get us away from the life force that it connects us all through nature.
totally. Yeah, I love that, because I think that's the other thing. You know, in my mind, does it as well, in terms of like, think about what's possible. I think about it first externally, but the other thing that's possible is like internal shift. Like, this is the thing I guess I can speak to even more than the external at this point, is like having sort of digested, or trying to digest and really kind of imbibe this like understanding. Like, I've been able to say have experiences with trees and clouds and even rocks I've never thought were possible. And before, yeah, I mean, I almost didn't believe when people would say that they were having those kind of experiences. Now it's like, that's real. um so I think like that is like a really, that's just as much of the shift as external.
Mhm. I love where you just took this conversation, and maybe for someone listening this is very abstract, but you're sitting in New Zealand, I'm sitting in Brazil, and both places with very alive and very powerful indigenous cultures that we can learn a lot from, even now still, where the Western dominant worldview has taken over a lot of places. And in this process, and I'm in this process myself, personally, as we're shifting what becomes possible from not just the external, but starting from the internal, we realize nature is more than just the world we land in to do things in. It's really an intelligence that connects all things. And when we flip our incentives, ergo the legal system,
Mhm.
when we flip our
Mhm.
incentives to operate from this internal compass first, from this connected, regenerative whole systems awareness, right? Um, yeah, there's I would say there is a like a nuance to life, like a sacredness that is very hard to put into words. But once you
Mhm.
start glimpsing at it, it's it's like a driving force for everything I do at this point. And it sounds and it feels like, Reggie, being on the line here with you and recording this beautiful podcast, that's a very similar occurrence in your world.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like I, there, money can't, uh, in this form of sort of, if you want to call it a currency, the sort of currency of connection, like, you can't buy that with money. Like, you can get support, um, and there are ways to, like, yeah, around that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the at least today, like, the work that I've done here is like, you could say on the financial level it's not paid, but I'm not worried about that one at all, because there's a different kind of like richness that comes from that connection. And um yeah, and there's other forms of capital than financial, like experiential capital and cultural capital, emotional and social capital. And yeah, a rich life is not just financially, having enough financial capital. It's those other forms of capital too. And I think ultimately that's why people want money, is they want a good life. And so I think hopefully that's part of where we're heading, is to say, hey, these are the kind of lives that we really want to live. What's going to make that possible? Maybe we're over prioritizing the financial right now. We want to come into a bit more balance.
Well, and as we're talking about building better worlds, that is a integral part of a better world. And it's very interesting that you earlier said that, calling it personhood rather than riverhood, is similar to the value of care or the value of connection. In our language, we still have to call it a form of capital gain, so we understand
Yeah.
it in an economic sense. And I think that's the shift that's occurring in many people, that we there is no problem in building powerful, beautiful technology, but can we build it from this place of nature connection? Because if we do, and if we come from that place first, a whole other world, as you said, it is unimaginable world, will become possible.
Yeah.
Maybe on the other side there, Reggie, a question like, what would you, if you were to metaphorically raise your finger in like, let's be careful kind of, like, what would you say, where's the line? Like, where do we have to stay very careful and very vigilant to, create an abundant, a shared and a transparent digital world as well? Because of course, this is a conversation that's made possible by us digitally connecting.
Yeah.
But so where do you see is like, maybe, I don't want to call it a danger zone, but somewhere where we have to continue to build and act in total integrity?
In terms of like how technology can be in service to what we're talking about?
In service rather than to actually take away from it, right? Which I think right now we're still seeing that both could be possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And probably both will continue to be possible and be actualizing. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you really touched on it, that the shift internal, the internal shift is maybe the most important, because once that comes into alignment, the things that you want to build and the things that are possible to build, and to even conceptualize, are different than before that shift. And so I think like that would be the place to start. And yeah, we can, to some degree, we can do that on our own, but to a huge degree, I think we need each other, to both make those shifts and then to hold each other, in like the best way, holding, kind of this interbeing sort of idea, to support each other in those shifts, to share the values that we're living more and more from, and aspire to live more and more from, and ask each other to help us live in the way that we really want to. And then I think the kinds of things that we'll build, will be different, and we may use a lot of the same technology. I mean, I'm also really excited about, Web3. I think aligning with basically users, like being able to own what they're using, and disrupting these power structures and moving more to decentralization. I think these are all really positive shifts. And yeah, I have a lot of wonderful conversations, along the lines that we're having right now with people in the crypto space. And so that is really encouraging to me. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that shift that needs to still be actualized, right? And it takes people like yourself and like everyone who's tuning into this episode to find their or our connection to purpose and our connection to actualize and realize this world that is a decentralized world, that is a shared world, that is an abundant world, into, I guess, the way that we humans made sense of this world, because nature around us is already rolling and flowing like this, and it's more our systems and our ways of creating transactions and contracts that want to upgrade to this kind of a way.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think like that's part of what I think I would love to help with too, is like, basically being a part of a group that looks at, okay, well, one of the things we want to do is we want to look at companies giving equity towards nature, to nature and to bioregions. And then how do people who are making this kind of shift, how can we support them and help them support one another in that kind of internal shift? So yeah, that's part of, I think that's part of how this could unfold.
Yeah, I want to ask one question that might be obvious, but just to, not to play devil's advocate, but to just to feel on the maybe on one of the more difficult nuances of that conversation. So actually, I just met a new friend from Ecuador, and we had a whole lot of longer conversations during a retreat I was hosting. And in Ecuador, nature has legal representation already, But in Ecuador specifically, the problem of corruption kind of overrides nature's legal, let's call it riverhood, or like personhood, and so that the value of money or the power of corruption still is in the way, for it to be actualized and realized. And so my question would be, from your experience in New Zealand and your experience and your dedication to this topic, is this a fear we have to have as long as there are really powerful corporate and monetary players, or is this something that you see maybe even move out of the picture entirely if we create those legal representations in a good way?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I feel like on the company side, like one of the things which I think can make a huge difference is companies being owned by their purpose. So with the company I'm working to start now, basically all of our shareholders will be bioregions, and will be legally obligated to stay focused. There'll be a trustee level above our board that will obligate our board to stay focused on the mission for which we exist, which is to work on the regeneration of bioregions and support that. And if the board starts to deviate from that, the trustees can then replace the board. So the Earth Equity level is actually above the board level, holds the board accountable to purpose. Mm-hmm. And then the other way that this is where I think it really gets into the actual kind of like DNA of the company is appropriate upside to investors, like saying, okay, there's risk here, and then a more of a waterfall approach to profits. So the first kind of bucket is kind of the employees bucket, and some for growth, then some repayment to investors, and then hopefully what is by far the biggest cup where those profits flow down are the bioregions. So we're kind of going, so to speak, all the way. So all the shareholders will be bioregions that we work with, and the board will be fully accountable. But I think it's that kind of shift that's actually needed, because what can happen is a company becomes extremely successful, more and more financially sophisticated investors come in, and in the DNA of almost every company, unless you change it, is shareholder primacy. Shareholders can, if they accrue enough shares and they're interested in financial return, which greater financial return is usually linked to extraction, they can actually force the board towards extraction. So we really need to make that kind of shift. Otherwise, every really successful company, financially successful company, will be taken over by financial interests, which will equate almost definitely to extraction. And so I think that's one of the things that is really key are those structural shifts. And yeah, happy to help and support companies with making those shifts.
Yeah, we have a bit of nature coming in through my microphone here in the back, but I love what you're saying. These structural shifts are, they're the path, because as companies gain this traction, gain the financial rewards, gain that financial power, right? We want to reward that not by extracting from the earth, but by continuing to create more value for all of life. Such a beautiful little taster of a conversation, Reggie. I feel like there's more in the interbeing and the space between the two of us. Maybe we continue it at another time. For now, thank you so much for coming on, for Building Better Worlds. It's highly interesting what you're sharing. There's a big depth there. Maybe as you're signing off, what would be a call to action or something you want to share where people can connect with you? Please do share.
Probably it may be that the easiest way to get in touch is through that new organization I mentioned, which is I guess I didn't mention the name, but it's Nature Tech, or nature.tech, and Nature Tech Nexus. So I'll have to check the website and see if there's a way to get in touch with us there. But there's other ways to connect with me on LinkedIn, or hopefully we'll make a way through that website. But yeah, I guess I would just say that for people who want to kind of make that sort of shift, especially for company founders and also people, I know there's a lot of really wonderful regenerative finance projects happening in the Web3 space. Yeah, if we can support in helping create that sort of structural integrity and make it possible for, yeah, for nature to basically be kind of a voice on the board. If a company wants to be obligated to its purpose and not be taken over by that shareholder primacy towards financial interests, like we can help with that. And I think also, like, just the last piece I would mention there is what I'm finding is that companies who and founders who think this kind of way, much more likely to be able to collaborate with one another. You know, if I know that you're obligated and you view nature as a, you know, as a stakeholder, and you're obligated to follow through on your purpose, and that's how your company is oriented, and that's how my company is oriented, it's way easier for us to work together. I don't have to worry about you deviating from your purpose or forgetting about the value of nature and connection to nature, because I know that's built into your company DNA, and it's part of your value system and part of mine. So I think that it's actually good business to value nature. And yeah, so it's a few things. But yeah, I would love to continue the conversation. It was really good to chat with you.
Thank you for your time and for the powerful mission and purpose you're on.
Thank you, and you too.
Yeah, for everyone tuning into this conversation, thanks for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and join the community under buildingbetterworlds.io. Thank you, Reggie.
Yeah, thank you.